That moment is incredible. To really take in New York City, to feel, to hear, to see New York City from above, in the heart of New York City, there's no comparison.
For nearly a century, the Empire State Building has stood as an icon for New York City. Perhaps the city's greatest celebrity, it has cultivated an enviable filmography.
Thousands of movies, commercials, comic books. It is the reference. It defines New York City. I like to think of ourselves as that we co-starred in the movie King Kong. You know, people would disagree, but I'm a little biased.
And yet, the Empire State Building is the main character of its own story. Calling claim to its own zip code and 2 acres of land on the island of Manhattan, the behemoth is one of the largest office buildings in the world. It was built in 410 days amid a rapidly growing city and a country in a frenzy.
In the 1920s, there were a lot of skyscrapers going up. It was the boom times for New York skyscrapers, and this was the tallest skyscraper in the world. It was, as they frequently said, the largest structure ever built by man.
Its stats are stunning. 200,000 cubic feet of Indiana limestone and granite, 10 million bricks, and 730 tons of aluminum and stainless steel. The building is a maze, a collage of old and new. Restoration projects throughout the last 2 decades have produced an Empire State Building that looks old and acts young.
The Empire State Building was built in 1931 and is one of the most energy efficient buildings in the world.
Today, New York is building taller, but the Empire State Building's stature surpasses its height. From the wind tunnels at its base to the city's most high-profile light show, the building is an intricate ecosystem, and its identity is set in steel.
Welcome to the concourse of the Empire State Building. This is where we start our all-access tour. And to assist me, we have all these amazing photographs that were taken by a single photographer. His name was Louis Hine, and he documented the construction process right from day one. If you look behind me over here, you get to see some of the 3,400 men that worked on this building at peak construction, and that was in the heart of the Great Depression. So if it wasn't for this building, many of these people would have been unemployed. So my day at the Empire State Building starts with me entering through 5th Avenue, and then I go downstairs into the basement where our uniform room and locker rooms are. I pick up my uniform, I get ready for the day. The rest of my day consists of running all over this building. The reactions that I get, especially when I'm giving tours and I get to bring people to areas that they never expected to see, like the basement or down to the refrigeration plant, is usually complete awe and wonder. And a lot of times when people come into the building, they don't really think about what makes this building work and operate day in and day out.
Standing 102 stories tall, the Empire State Building was the world's tallest from 1931 to the 1970s, when the Twin Towers took the title. To its highest floor, the building measures a staggering 1,250 feet. Count the spire and antenna, and it extends 1,454 feet into the Midtown Manhattan sky.
The Empire State Building doesn't really have competition. I still feel that we do have the best views because of our location, and no matter what, we have a history that nobody can compete with.
The building began to take shape in the late 1920s, the throes of the Jazz Age. It was a time of excess and economic prosperity.
The ambition to build the Empire State Building was really the idea of a group of businessmen. They got as the head of their organization Al Smith, who had been Governor Al Smith of New York, and he had run for the presidency and lost, so he needed a job. He was the president of the Empire State Building Corporation. The story of the Empire State Building is really about the speed of the erection of the steel frame and the completion of the building. It is an expression of machine-age technology, of construction know-how, and it is double of every other skyscraper in New York.
Construction moved at a record-breaking pace. At a rate of 4.5 stories per week, the process took 1 year and 45 days to complete. Compare that to the 3 years it took to build the Chrysler Building.
We're standing on the north side of 34th Street at the corner of 5th Avenue, very busy intersection. And it was a place where people would gather during the construction of the building. There's actually a famous photo from up in the construction of the crowds gathered here along the sidewalk. It was quite a spectacular event, and it was actually something of a spectator sport. Men were not wearing hard hats. They were not tethered, so the steelworkers would be walking on the beams, and you could watch them, freestyling along the construction site as it happened, and that was something that people found very, very exciting.
Glenn Kurtz is writing a book about the construction workers who built the Empire State Building. He's explored just how the building's image came to be.
There was a tremendous attempt to construct the image of the building as something extraordinary and special, even as the building was being built. The steelworker, the iron worker who built the building, sort of became this figurehead for American ability, and they became these kind of symbols of the sort of daring, brash, can-do American spirit.
That spirit was imbued in the building itself from the very beginning. The demolition of the old Waldorf Astoria Hotel in 1929, followed by the work of these venerated laborers, seemed emblematic of the replacement of old aristocratic money with the new can-do businessman.
But then the stock market crashed.
Black Tuesday, the bottom dropped out. The average price of major stocks falling nearly 40 points.
So during the construction, you can actually see this transformation in the coverage of the building from a sort of triumph of American capital to the triumph of the American worker, right? And the workers themselves became these figureheads for what we can still do despite the difficult times.
Glenn's most recent work involved identifying some of those workers, many of whom appear in photographs Louis Hine took during the construction process.
Iron workers were really the sort of stars of the show. And so there were a couple of photographs, which have subsequently become quite famous, of iron workers constructing the building. One in particular of a man, what's called riding the balls. It's a very kind of glamorous photo. And it happens that this man was interviewed for a newspaper article, and he's rendered in this article as a devil-may-care, sort of, happy-go-lucky, traveling from here and there. And maybe that was true of this man. It's possible. It's impossible really to know. But if you do pursue his history, it's a somewhat fraught image if you actually go beneath the surface of what the articles and the photographs tell you.
We're on the 86th floor of the Empire State Building. The top of this structure is the highest thing in the world today.
When the Empire State Building opened on May 1st, 1931, the United States was in the midst of the Great Depression. The Roaring '20s had given way to a stock market crash and economic devastation.
Famously, the Empire State Building remained empty for more than a decade. It wasn't profitable until 1951, and it was called the Empty State Building through the Depression in the 1930s. And so it took more than a decade for the Empire State Building to find its tenants.
The Empire State Building's signature spire and antenna, which is hit by lightning an average of 25 times a year, gave the building an unquestionable lead in a competition for height with the Chrysler Building. And along with the spire comes a story.
Look at the scoop the Paramount cameraman caught. It looks like a scene from 1992.
One thing the building was not used for, a parking spot for blimps. Counterfeited photographs show it happening, and a real video shows one feigned attempt. The public was made to believe wealthy businessmen from Germany could travel in blimps across the Atlantic, dock in the middle of the city by attaching the blimp to the mast, and descend from their Zeppelin onto a platform that would take them groundward.
So it wasn't a practicable idea. It never happened. There was a kind of stunt to pass off some mail from a blimp to the top of the mooring mast. But the designers knew that this is not a key function, but it became a part of the story and the legend.
Instead, the spire would eventually play host to an antenna for local television and radio broadcasts. It's been nearly a century since the Empire State Building became a landmark silhouette. Today, the 91-year-old building is home to companies like LinkedIn and Shutterstock. And that's not all that has changed. The building inhabits a space where past and present coexist. Suspended between history and modernization, the icon, so distinctly New York, is both historically reverent and technologically advanced. The Empire State Realty Trust started a major modernization project in 2010 with the goal of maximizing energy efficiency while preserving, in some cases restoring, the building's character.
We've retrofitted all 6,514 windows, and we quadrupled their performance and reused over 96% of the materials. We retrofitted the entire chiller plant, so all of the cooling in this building comes from the chiller plant, and we gutted the machines. So the same way we reused windows, we reused the chiller materials, right? The giant metal shells, and we recycled all of the copper and metal that were inside and rebuilt the guts to be as efficient as possible and by modern standards.
This is our trades hallway. So this is really our backstage area. This is all the stuff that keeps this building running that you don't get to see day in and day out, that keeps our building looking absolutely beautiful and running perfectly.
Started here as a helper when I was 20 years old, and I'm still here right now, working my way up. This is the creme de la creme, if you ask me, as far as engineering jobs go. Pretty much, we do all the day-to-day operations. In the wintertime, we provide heat to the tenants. In the summertime, we provide air conditioning. We take care of all tenant complaints. Anything that, arrives, in the day-to-day operation of the building, we would handle.
We have the largest wireless building management system in the world. That's all the controls for every piece of equipment in the building to make it as efficient as possible.
We have this Cortex Energy program, and they monitor hundreds of points throughout the building. Outside air temperature, temperatures inside the spaces. It calculates everything. At a certain temperature, at a certain day of the week, at a certain time, if we start these machines up, we'll have chilled water by a certain time of day, and that should be enough to cool the building and keep all occupants comfortable.
In terms of energy efficiency, the building's age worked to its advantage.
So this building was actually built in a sustainable way that many new buildings are not, because it was built for natural daylight, for natural views, where the longest distance between a window and the core is never more than 28 feet, and that was a design intent, where fresh, cool air was designed to come in and up through the whole building, and where the building would hold its temperature to keep the occupants comfortable. So we still have huge oversized windows, tons of daylight and views, and even operable windows, so fresh air comes into this building.
The activity starts 55 feet below ground, where wind tunnels bring fresh air up to the lower floors of the building. Built in 1930, the building had no air conditioning system. The wind tunnels were necessary to cool the building, and they still work.
Inside our wind tunnels and were water tables, where water collects from what's settling inside the building. That was designed to actually bring fresh air up to the lower floors that are underground, like where we are right now in the lower level, 35 feet underground. There's also a story of how a river ran underneath the Empire State Building, and it is down there somewhere, and it eventually goes out to the Hudson. So right now we are standing in front of our bank vaults. This is something you probably would not expect to see or hear about in the Empire State Building. But remember, we were an office building, and we still are today. And one of our first and original tenants was a bank. It was Irving Trust Bank. They were on the second floor. And one of the things they left behind for us is the bank vault. So this has been here for 91 years. So what the vault is used for today is actually storage areas. There is no money here, unfortunately not, no. They did remove all the safe deposit boxes out in the late 90s. The bank had been long gone. The second floor had had many, many uses throughout the years, but the vault survived.
Above a lobby used by tourists and tenants and a second-floor museum are 77 floors of office space. Separate elevator banks take tourists up to an outdoor observatory on the 86th floor and a recently revamped indoor observatory on the 102nd.
You can see the entire world from up here. We can see about 90 miles out in the distance up to the horizon. Some of the key points when people are up here they want to see is Yankee Stadium, Central Park, the Hudson River. Where Sully landed the plane is probably one of my top 5 most frequently asked questions from the top.
Part of the business plan of the Empire State Building was the observation deck, and it was a kind of publicity machine for the building as well. And, you know, we think of it with kind of romance movies or King Kong. The kind of imagery and reputation of the building was disseminated through the world, literally, through film and through this kind of cinematic presence.
The 102nd floor observatory is a more recent addition, but the 86th floor is one that has attracted tourists for decades.
Welcome to the heart of New York City, our open-air, 360-degree views on this glorious spring day. My gosh, we couldn't have programmed this better. Fantastic. So we have this. You can't really beat this. Unobstructed 360 views in every direction. Outside deck, we hear New York and the vibrancy of New York.
The building opened its newly renovated 102nd floor observatory to the public in 2019.
The strategy was, how do we get out of the way of the views? And that transformation on the 102nd floor is probably the most dramatic transformation resulting from that strategy. We now have floor-to-ceiling glass on the 102nd floor.
For so many, the Empire State Building means more than just scenic views.
I think for a lot of people, it enters their emotional lives through the personal experience or whether they see it in film or something that they relate to, and then they have the ambition to go there and see it themselves.
Lebanese, born in Mexico City, grew up in West Africa, came to the United States August 14th, 1980 as a first-generation immigrant. For me, I'll never forget the very first time I visited the building was in August of 2001, when I had family from Lebanon visiting, and of course, this was on our bucket list, a must visit. And all I have these fond memories of family members that are no longer with me today, but that moment is incredible. To really take in New York City, to feel, to hear, to see New York City from above, in the heart of New York City, there's no comparison. This was a life event for my family to be at the Empire State Building, on top of the world, right here in the heart of New York City. That was the event in itself. And this is what the power of this aspirational brand is. It's just, it is an event in itself just to be here. That's aspirational brand component of, I did it. We made it to New York City.
Glenn, too, has his own personal history with the building. His father worked there running a boys' shirt company.
Well, my father's office was in the building, all the way up on the 3rd floor. It always seemed somewhat of a shame to me, a little bit embarrassing to say that he worked in the Empire State Building on the 3rd floor. But I grew up coming to the building, visiting my father, and you know, running up and down the hallways and pressing the elevator buttons. So it's something that's always been in my life.
So much has changed over the 9 decades the Empire State Building has stood as a birthmark on the New York City skyline. No longer the tallest in the world or even the city. Today, newer, taller buildings are popping up all the time. One World Trade Center stands at 1,776 feet. Central Park Tower measures 1,550 feet tall, and Steinway Tower comes in at 1,428 feet, just to name a few. But its stature remains intact.
Empire State Building is the establishment shot in modern television and movies for New York in a lot of cases. And though it's challenged by other taller buildings on New York skyline, somehow when you see the silhouette of the Empire State Building, you know that that's New York. And the building, survives in its iconicity, if you want to use that word, its imageability, by representing the history of New York, the consistent history of Manhattan as a skyscraper city, the spirit of modernity that it represents.
Some of the building's magic is in its history. The rest is in the lights. For decades, the top of the Empire State Building is shown for the city at night. Today, lights in various hues pay homage to various causes, occasions, and organizations. The system in use today consists entirely of LEDs.
From a technology perspective, it was amazing to see the transformation of the helium lights that we used to have on the setbacks. It was, we're using these huge gels to change the colors of the building. And it took 4 electricians almost the entire day to prep for the colors in that evening. To today's new lights, with our LED lights, that have over 16 million color combinations that we can create, and all the way from a couple levels down and all the way to the very tip of the antenna.
The lighting program includes the acknowledgement of various holidays, religious and secular, but leaves space for requests. Organizations and individuals submit applications asking to use the lights to honor their own causes or entertain their own whims.
We're not going to reveal who gets to decide, but I can say it's a committee that reviews all the applications. So we have an online process. There's 0 fee associated with any lighting event. There's certain requirements, and then the team vets every single request, approves, recommends approval, not approval, and we decide to move forward. But it's a secret.
In a city always moving and forever changing, the lights of the Empire State Building remain a constant.
Everybody looks up skyward at night, and really, because we are the icon, because of the 90 years of history that we have with this city, with the people from all over the world, and we continue to have with multiple generations, we connect emotionally with the world. And so we're the inspiration, where people turn to us at night to say, okay, what's going on tonight? On the hour, all of our lights sparkle. And you'll know that it's top of the hour every hour at night when the lights sparkle. So even if you don't have your watch, oh, must be the top of the hour, the building is sparkling.
For even the most jaded New Yorkers, harried and haggard from stress-infused commutes, long days, and longer nights, there is alchemy in a glance at the Empire State Building against the night sky. Historic and modern, old and new, it stands as the embodiment of dichotomy. At the end of the day, as the lights switch on, it casts its spell for all to see.